Yesterday, National Public Radio was covering, of course, the hurricane, and they were interviewing one of the responders from Louisiana who was traveling toward the Carolinas. And this responder, like probably many of us are trying to do, was like trying to make sense out of why. Why do we have these types of natural disasters? And the responder, in their own theology, was making sense of it as an opportunity being provided for us to not be such lonely, isolated people, and to remember how we come back together as community. So thank you for reminding me of that story yesterday. And this week we are watching as people have been physically soaked in the storms. And because of our screens and speakers, we're able to connect with it in a pretty visceral way. Relentless rains and fierce winds, we watch as more lives are lost, 1 million people without power. And our hearts go out to the people and animals who are impacted. Unitarian Universalists put their prayers and energy toward that, as we did a little earlier. And we also try to move our resources to providing actual help. And if you're someone who has resources to share, there's a note in your order of service insert that tells how you can add some money to the Unitarian Universalist Relief Fund. And it's hard to watch as so many lives are being disrupted, and it's also hopeful to hear about all the people who are going in to help. Whenever there's a hurricane or wildfire or some natural disaster, there are those who heed the warnings issued by authorities that say, pack up whatever you can and leave this place. And there are those who opt instead to do what's called shelter in place. Never mind that officials and authorities and wise people are begging them to leave. And as we watch these stories when they occur, I'm really always fascinated by the people who choose to stay. The media must be as well, because they always cover them. And one reason I feel personally fascinated is because I probably can't imagine not following the rules set forth by an authority. I almost always drive the speed limit. I usually stop at the stop signs. I try never to eat food that is past its expiration date. I have that privilege. I try to stand in line in the correct way at the library. I really want to be a good citizen. And so when they say, leave, who are these ones who stay? I tell everybody that I'm a very good follower. So in the book of Jonah, the story we heard earlier this morning, it's really hard for me to understand this reluctant prophet Jonah, who is given this very clear message from his God. There is no hidden symbolism in it. It's not like invisible ink scattered on a piece of old parchment paper. No, God says super clearly, Jonah, get up. Go, tell these people of Nineveh that they are doing harm. Get out of here. And yeah, it would be a little bit of a scary job to get from your God to go to this place where everything you've heard about the people of Nineveh is that they're actually pretty mean and hard to get along with. I get that. But still, Jonah says, I don't think so. And so instead of heading east, he heads west, and he gets on a boat, and he very intentionally heads away from the presence of his God. So it's possible that Jonah is really just looking out for himself and is thinking, I've heard the stories, and so if I really want to be safe, I'm not going to go tangle with all those people there. But of course, we know from our story that it's hard to trick Jonah's God. And so God puts on his tracking device and he finds Jonah on the ship. He hurls a huge storm at them, a storm that threatens to shatter the ship into a million pieces. So it's this huge storm that not only would be scary probably for us, but think about these seasoned sailors aboard this ship who have weathered so many previous storms. Even they are frightened beyond belief. They don't understand what's happening. And so as they're doing everything they can to batten down the hatches, what does our friend Jonah do? He goes down into the hold of the ship, into its belly, and he falls asleep. He falls asleep. And there, the ship's captain finds him, and echoing what Jonah's God says earlier, the ship's captain says, Jonah, get up. Get up. As the sea rages, as winds batter the ship, as rains soak every inch of it, Jonah, the cause of all this destruction, he's just able to sleep there. So this book of Jonah, only 4 chapters, is read during the afternoon Yom Kippur services in synagogue. Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, it's considered the holiest day in the Jewish liturgical year. Yom Kippur is not a festive holiday, so in case you're not sure, don't wish anyone a happy Yom Kippur. It will fall a little strangely, though probably people would just be glad that you know Yom Kippur is coming. It's a day of deep introspection, and it's a day where observant Jews mimic death in life. So it's a day of fasting. It's a day of abstaining from any physical pleasure. It's a day where observant Jews wear all white, reminiscent of the funeral shroud that an observant Jew will wear upon death. And so during this time of Yom Kippur, we're asked to consider, how have you lived into your values in this past year? How have you been true to those deepest yearnings of your heart? How have you helped build beloved community? How have you kept the vows you yourself have made between you and whoever you name as God? On Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah, the Unatana Tokef prayer is said. And I'm just going to ask you to get in a space of hearing this prayer. On Rosh Hashanah, this is written, on the fast of Yom Kippur, it is sealed. How many will pass away from this world? How many will be born into it? Who will live and who will die? Who by water and who by fire? Who will reach the ripeness of age and who will be taken before their time? Who by war and who by beast? Who by famine? Who by drought? Who by earthquake and who by plague? Who will rest and who will wander? Who will be tranquil and who will be troubled? Who will be calm and who will be tormented? Who will live in poverty and who in prosperity? Who will be humbled and who will be exalted? Who? It's the recognition that no matter where we are today, no matter what certainty we have convinced ourselves that we have, that surely this same time next year, our hearts will be different, Our very physical lives may be different. As I look out among you, I'm so aware that this time last year, our January Nordman was still with us, and now she's not. And as I look out among you, I'm aware that some of you have lost dearly beloved ones in the past year. And I'm aware that last year, some of you may have thought that you would have a year of rest, and yet you had a year of troubles and worry. You may have anticipated a year of health, and yet you've had a year with illness or doubt. This prayer is a moment of coming face to face with the realization that the lives we lead are imperfect, and that life as we know it right here, right now, today, it's impermanent. We're just passing through, each and every one of us. In 2015, during these days of awe, which are the 10 days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, my grandmother was in the hospital and she was actively in her dying process. And it was almost impossible for me to sit in the pews at synagogue and read that prayer during that time. I knew life would be very different the next year. We can understand this prayer in a very literal way, which is our lives will be different in the year to come. And are our hearts and our souls ready to accept whatever kind of change is coming at us? Do we have a community ready to hold us through whatever kind of change is coming at us? We can also understand those words more metaphorically, that in this year, will we actually live fully into these lives that we've been given? We can ask, who will fall asleep in the underbelly of the boat, missing out on the promise of your life? The invitation of these high holy days is one of reflection, one of returning to the land of your soul, remembering who and where and what we are. And as you're imagining the days to come, I ask you, what might be keeping you from fully inhabiting this life you're living? What keeps your true face and true heart hidden from the world? Is it busyness or feeling unworthy or fear or tiredness, or you name in your mind all the complexities that you live with that keep you from your full and true face and heart? The thing that keeps Jonah separate from his God and ultimately from himself is the anger that's so dear to him. In the book of Jonah, God asks him, has anger become your goodness? Has hate displaced the good in you? And what of you? Is there something that has cooked long enough in you and you are ready to let it fly out into the universe, separate at last? Is it something you're ready to release, to feel a little more light, a little more openness in your own world? I invite you to think about that. Is there something that you are ready to let go of that is no longer serving you and your purpose in the world? And as that comes to mind, our friends Pat and Rachel are going to come up the aisle with a little piece of paper, pencils if you need them. And I invite you to write down a word or a symbol for whatever that thing is that you are ready and willing to let go of. And then when the time's right for you, as you're able to come down to our altar and we have bowls of water representing the deep wells of our lives, and you're invited to drop this piece of paper in and watch it dissolve. And of course, this won't magically dissolve whatever you're holding, unfortunately. But it can be a reminder, this ritual action, that we have choices, and there are some things, not all things, but some things that we can work to get rid of. So if only it were that easy. The book of Jonah ends with a question. And so it's a very Unitarian Universalist text in that regard to end with a question. God asks Jonah, and in essence through this question is asking all of us, where is your compassion? Why can't you love? And Rabbi Edward Feinstein writes that this final question asked isn't asked in disapproval or rage, that it's asked through a veil of divine tears. Why can't you love? God looks at the world and the chaos and confusion we create for one another and wonders, what happened? Yom Kippur asks us to look at our own lives in that same way. Asks us to look at our lives through our own veil of tears, through any chaos or confusion or hurt or even dispiritedness that we hold for ourselves. And reminds us that each day we can begin again in love. Mark Nepo wrote, "The whole of life has a power to soften and open us against our will, to irrigate our spirits. And in those moments, we discover that tears, the water from within, are a common blood, mysterious and clear. We may speak different languages and live very different lives, but when that deep water swells to the surface, it pulls us toward each other." May you remember time and again this week to begin again in love. May your heart be open enough that you allow yourselves to be pulled together again and again with each other and with what you know as sacred. We sing our closing hymn, "I Know I Can," number 1015. Please rise as you are able.